On the show today, Marcela Widrig. So Marcela has been involved with the conference for a little while, had very good things about it from the 2018 conference. She's an embodied facilitator of trauma, background in the Grinberg Method, Embodied Flow, all kinds of other things we're going to talk about, no doubt. Marcela, you're super welcome.
Thank you, Mark. I'm happy to be here.
Where are you in the world today?
Los Angeles.
LA, and is that your home?
Now it is, yeah. I moved back to the States from Bali kind of officially at the beginning of the year. So,
Okay, all right. I'm
yeah.
curious about that, but let's start with a little bit about your history. How did you get interested in the body, embodiment, trauma, and all this stuff you're involved with now?
Wow, kind of by chance, really, effectively by chance, right? I say that. My dearest friend at the time in Barcelona, I was living there, was doing this body work thing, and it was the most remote thing from my awareness at that time. And this was back in the 90s, so you can imagine, mid 90s. And I was her guinea pig. So every Friday, she needed a body to practice on, and I would tromp over in an exhausted state from having held back my rage and my shame and my humiliation.
I need to talk about there, I think, Marcela.
And I would show up on her table, and initially I would just fall sound asleep. I was really like the least attentive client ever. And then I went to a workshop, really basic, 3-day, like it was a 3-day workshop, but actually nothing with the Grinberg method at the time was basic. That's a very intense methodology. And I remember the distinct moment where some learned behavior of mine all of a sudden became separate from me. And how let's say how I felt about myself in that moment. Like there was something there. First of all, there was much less criticism about myself, right? And there was this like memory, there was a remembrance of, oh yeah, I know this state of being. I just don't spend much time here. And so then I started more personal work than anything. And then a couple years into it, I thought, okay, well, can I do this? Can I do this work? And that was in 1997. And
Okay,
I never looked back. Yeah.
so we've had a couple of people on that have done the Grinberg method. My friend Adi from Israel, for example. But can you say briefly what that is? Because it's not known in a lot of circles.
No, it's not known. I guess it's an approach to life, and it's basically teaching you through your body how to undo learned behavior, and in the unlearning, discovering what's there. And so there's a lot of different options that they teach through touch, they teach through workshops, through physical trainings, through movement. And look, it was a phenomenal training as a base, but then I reached a point where in order for me to express my talents and my own being through my work, I had to like absolutely disaffiliate with them, because
Mhm.
that was a kind of methodology that had grown into it had become a very rigid structure, almost
Yeah,
like a belief system. And so
I've heard some bad things from a few people, and
yeah,
not necessarily even about the method, but
yeah,
I've
yeah,
heard
yeah,
some,
yeah.
and definitely know some good people working within that system who are still within it, and quite a few good ones who have left.
Yeah.
And by the sounds of things, if I hear something from one or two people, I think it's gossip. But when I hear it from 5 or 10 who I respect and trust, who are very different people, I go, okay, so something's up. So maybe that's enough to say there. What else was a major influence on you in terms of sort of other systems, other things, other practices?
Well, I mean, I've practiced yoga for, almost equally as long, and that was mainly to get through an injury. And then also yoga started to feel very rigid to me, like,
Mhm.
wait a minute, what's happening here? So that I had to evolve. That's when I found embodied flow, and that completely
My
opened me.
friend Tara, love to you, Tara, if you're out there
Yeah,
listening. I sent her a text yesterday. So,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So that kind of reinvigorated my love for the body, and also helped me separate some more from the way that I was holding the Grinberg method in my body. And So I would say those are pretty huge influencers, but I just think I'm fascinated by human behavior. You know, I never stop being fascinated by humans' capacity to learn.
Nice,
And
nice.
yeah.
Okay, and what about right now? Is there something you're particularly interested in right now? Learning edge, something that's really just juicy for you now?
Hmm. I've been doing a couple of things on this, the like private learning. One of them is called the Celtic Wheel, where it's really looking at the Celtic holidays and systems, but it's so deeply and profoundly connected to nature. And so, and the way that our system and our talents and our creativity and like the cycles that we are actually humanly supposed to be living by and through and with, right? Like in order to start something new, to allow death to happen and to trust this dark space that you might enter into of unknown. And so it just really, initially I thought, well, I'm not Irish and that feels a little bit remote to me, but this, the topics are, they resonate deeply and they're informing my approach to teaching and also just to processing what the hell is going on right now in this world of COVID, right?
Listen, I'm Irish, so I can give you cultural appropriation kind of pass here, Marcela, no problem. So is it kind of seasonal? Is it like a kind of pagan seasonal kind of thing? What's the crack? Tell me a bit more.
There's the equinox that it follows, but there are there's Samhain that starts in October, and then it moves on into Bealtaine, into Imbolc, into now we're in Lugnasa, and so I'm pronouncing those, I'm sure, very incorrectly, but it's just a rhythm, and it is a rhythm that makes a lot of sense, and it's a rhythm that you can apply to your year. It's a rhythm you can apply to your day. If I look at it, like in this COVID period, I had to let a lot of things die. And
Right.
if I hadn't learned to really go through that, let's say, death process,
Mhm.
something new couldn't happen. And I would, I'd be sucked into the mire of this period. But the other thing that I'm doing right now is, I'm sure you know this about the Rooted group that Corinne Bell has started. And I got involved in the um, somatic abolition group that's been
Let's talk
created.
about those groups. So Karen Bell, obviously of the trauma conference we've had on the show, and a lot of love and respect. So
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
want to, yeah, tell us what's going on.
Well, obviously with this cultural reckoning that's pretty forceful here in the States, depending on, forceful in both directions. And so that just pulled me in a moment. And I can't really tell you why, but it was like somebody flipped on a light switch and all of a sudden I went, what have I been doing up until now with my white body? What have I been doing and how have I been looking at the world? And suddenly everything that I knew felt I began to question it. And it's something I haven't deeply embodied yet, and I'm still kind of stripping the layers away, but it does feel like it is going to deeply inform my work. But
Mm.
right now it's just informing me personally.
Okay, it's a hell of a way you put it. A cultural reckoning. I've never heard anyone put it that way before. It makes sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to summarize that in a phrase, but I'm hoping that the reckoning really happens, because we're at the very beginning.
That's a bit close to revenge, though, for my liking. When I hear the word reckoning, that normally means a bill to be paid. I mean, that's literally in German, the reckoning. It's Dutch, no, Dutch, I think. The reckoning means like a bill, Sounds like there's a bill to be paid or a revenge to be had, or at least a price to be paid for the sins of the father kind of thing.
Yeah, I guess I don't really look at it that way, but maybe that's because I didn't have the right language, but I look at it more as just a really profound shakeup.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And in that shakeup, a lot of what you just said could happen, right? It could. I mean, there's a lot that to make amends for. But also the one thing that I'm very conscious of is how does shame fit into this structure,
Yeah, yeah. Shame's one of your things, isn't it? And I definitely hear people in this area either shaming people or reacting out of a sort of anger, like refusal. Like, for example, I refuse to be ashamed of something that I haven't done. Absolutely refuse. I refuse to pay the bill too. I absolutely refuse. So it's like, why, you know, this, and people really respond out of a defensiveness around attempted shaming as well. So you're the shame expert, Marcel. So when I shut up and let you talk about this.
Look, I mean, there's toxic shame, there's healthy shame.
Okay, what's the difference? What's the difference?
Well, toxic shame is what you just described. Somebody feels like they feel that they're being made to feel bad about themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They're being accused of something, let's say,
Yeah.
and so they react, and they react usually in a way that has to kind of right the power game that's happening. Whereas if I receive something and I'm curious about it, and I look at healthy shame as a flow that in my body that doesn't tell me I'm doing right or wrong. It reminds me that I'm human. It reminds me not to humiliate another person or to diminish another person. There's no defensiveness in that state of being.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I don't have to diminish myself. This is the other thing that I think is happening, right? In the States, I saw some things happening around this with shame that all of a sudden, like, white people were saying, I'm so ashamed to be white. And I think, well, that's not the point. And
doesn't seem healthy.
And then this kind of contrition, like this unnatural deferral or to others suddenly, that's not the point either. Shame is to make us more healthy. Flow of shame will make us more human and stand really clearly in who we are.
So a healthy shame, isn't that acknowledging that I have done something which goes against my own values? Would you describe that as a healthy shame? Like the feeling that comes when I say, you know what, I've been doing this thing which doesn't match my values, as opposed to feeling ashamed for past generations or for something I didn't actually have responsibility for. Surely healthy shame is when I say, wow, I did this and that's not cool.
Well, then you have to look at the whole, what you've carried down in your legacy as a human, because you could have the shame of your ancestors.
Like in something that my Irish granddad did, that he killed people in World War II, and now I feel bad about it, even though it wasn't.
It's not that you feel bad about it. It's that something is retained in your body and is playing itself out today, right? So it might get triggered in very, very unrelated situations, but it's still something that if it stays stuck in place, that conflict, that like push pull that separates us from each other is still going to be happening. So I'm not so busy about like, checking off the boxes of, oh yes, my ancestors did A, B, C, and D. I come to my body and I think, how does that resonate in my body? And is there anything in me that is contracting and shrinking and, wanting to shy away? Okay, well then that's a place that I can go look at. So I don't care about, yes, we did that and I'm responsible for it. I care about how clean is my body holding this energy or not.
So what do we do when we experience that? So for example, I was just in Berlin and one of my grandfathers bombed Berlin. He was partially responsible as one of a bomber crew for killing probably hundreds, if not thousands of people in that town. And I have this weird feeling when I'm in Berlin, and it feels like it's not mine. And I don't have it in any other country but Germany.
Right.
Like my people killed your people. And it's really in my body when I'm there, Like what do we do when something like that comes up?
Well, how do you feel it in your body?
Sometimes I feel like inappropriate anger or fear when I hear like a German accent in a way I don't fear when I hear Swedish accent.
Right.
So they kind of sort of like a weird emotional response or just like a subtle disquiet in my whole body when I'm there. Like I shouldn't be here. I'm in the enemy's place,
Right.
And I got a lot of friends in Berlin, so that's weird. I could, have dinner with 50 people in Berlin. But it's still there in a way in Berlin that I do not experience it in Amsterdam, which is not far, not that far away culturally. Holland versus Germany, right? Or Sweden, don't experience it. Or Russia, never had any problem there.
Yeah. So what do? You let that energy move through you. all the way up to your head. And that's the tricky part, because we're always trying to reorganize ourselves through our mind and resolve whatever our body is feeling, right? So you acknowledge, yeah, okay, so let's say for your mind, it doesn't make sense that you feel this disquiet and this dis-ease, but it's in your body. How are you going to deny it, right? It's a vibrant energy that you're aware of. So if you can just settle in, put your feet on the ground, use the tools that you have, and agree to the energy, like really agree, relax your belly, soften your jaw, let go in your neck, and soften around the eyes, which is where we hold, a lot of where we're trying to figure it out. So we'll hold hold effort in our eyes and our forehead. There's no figuring it out. It's there. But it has to ride its full wave, because that's the thing. You can go back and you can connect it to a specific scenario of your lineage, but so the only thing you can do is let that energy complete its run.
Mm-hmm.
And if you let that energy complete its run in your body, which can be heat, shivers, shakes, with no mitigation from your mind, and that's hard. That's where embodiment and tools come into play very strongly. Then that can shift the cultural references that you even hold, right? Like,
you think we're seeing almost like an attempted completion of an intergenerational rage right now, with a lot of the stuff happening in the States and other countries, like particularly the States, that there seems to be like this rage that couldn't be expressed at the time, which is now trying to play out?
right, it is. And my concern, let's say, or what I'm observing, is the lack of tools that people have for that,
So it's
right?
like skillful, it's being, what do you mean by that?
Well, let's just think about rage.
Mm-hmm.
Most people are very afraid of rage,
Mm-hmm.
because in your mind, when you think about rage, it's we've divided it into categories, and I of good and bad.
Rage often comes with violence, so that's maybe not surprising.
Well, right, but like also we think of violence as bad, and I'm talking about energy, the energy of violence. I'm not talking about what your mind says violence is, because if you look at the earth manufactures and creates and shifts and destroys through violent energy, through an energy of fury that cannot be stopped. So there is amazing power in it. It's just that, again, we've twisted it into needing to dominate human beings and cause harm. But if you feel an energy that, let's call it fury, because I think that's more what people can maybe connect to than violence, because people shrink away from it. But if you can tap into an energy that feels absolutely insanely wild in your body, and you can trust to let it flow through you and then guide you. But we have to do that flip, and that flip, I only know that flip can happen in the body. So when I get back to the rage that I see happening around me, I think a lot of it's very toxic. It can become healthy rage. Some of it's healthy. There are people here doing absolutely amazing things for anti-racism. They've channeled that pain, that like old humiliation, that old rage, and they've said, we are going to make a change and we're going to make a difference.
What do you think's the interaction with COVID, and kind of how people have felt about that? Fear, frustration, different things like that?
Well, I think it's allowed for this opening to happen. There wasn't space before, right? Like, you look around the world and everybody's going, you guys have an absolutely insane situation in the States. Why aren't you marching in the streets? And I think, well, okay, there's a lot of systemic reasons why we're not, but I think there wasn't the space. And so
Especially
now,
like people having time, people being at work. Is that?
yeah,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
yeah. And
Yeah, that's.
if your healthcare is tied to your job, right,
Mhm,
which is the
mhm,
way it is in the
mhm.
States, you're not going to go march in the street because you're panicked about losing your job and therefore losing your health care and losing your home, et cetera,
Yeah,
et
yeah.
cetera. right?
Yeah.
So now you've got people at home.
That's so fucked. Let me just take a moment, Marcela. Like having a healthcare linked to your job, it's so surreal to me as a sort of someone that grew up with the national health system in Britain. Like the idea that if I don't go to work, I'm not going to have healthcare. But surely, like the people who aren't able to work are the people who most need healthcare. Like that, it's just fucking mental. And I just want to state, because I know half our audience are American. It's like you do get you're doing something surreal and weird in America with this. Like no European country would dream of having a system like that.
So, but wait a minute, Mark. No, they don't get that it's surreal and weird. And so if I get back to your question about COVID and
Hey,
the
excuse me,
fear,
I'm just tripping. I just felt like a rage of maybe some energy of myself. I need to express that. I remember falling off a scooter in America and thinking, oh God, I hope I haven't hurt myself. I can't afford the bills, you know. And I
yeah,
thought, how safe could you feel living with that in the background? Not in COVID, just in any old times, you know?
you don't feel safe. And so this is why, so many Americans have built this construct of safety that as long as I, have these things and as long as I work excessively in this, at my job, I'm safe.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
now what I see with COVID is that there are a lot of people who don't know how to cope. They really, really do not know how to cope. And so some crazy things are happening. And what I'm curious about in all of
Yeah.
this is there's a potential for tremendous imagination of how to shift the way we've been doing things and how to return, like it wasn't working. Let's all just be very clear. This
Yeah.
structure of how we've built things up was not working. So now, we've got a chance
This is
to do
pretty
something.
optimistic. I mean, that in itself is culturally very American, but it's like America's at its worst right now. It's not at its best.
No, I
Like in
know.
terms of the nervous systems, right? I mean, you're the trauma therapist here, so it's like
Yep.
I find it pretty optimistic that you're thinking there's some sort of chance of something good. I mean, I hope something good comes out of it. But
No, you're missing my point. I'm not saying I'm not hopeful that something good is going to happen. I'm seeing that there's and believe me, I'm looking around going, there's a lack of imagination in so many people. I'm sort of stunned because they think, I want to get back to normal. I mean, why do you think there's all these crazies, doing what they're doing in the supermarkets and the this and the that? Because they have no imagination.
I don't know what you
Because
mean, crazies. I'm not particularly keen when people say people are crazies unless they've really got mental health issues. Who are you referring to here?
the crazy behavior, I should say, of people in
Buying
these
toilet roll or what?
yeah, going into shops and there's videos of people spitting on others because they don't want to wear their mask and
There's this big sort of mask thing in the US, isn't there? We don't quite have it to the same degree here. I mean, people make their own choices here, and some do. And for example, in the street where I live, about 50% wear masks and 50% don't. But no one's really like fighting about it. It's considered a choice. It seems like
yes,
it's become almost a
that
division there, like
that's
politically or
the
something.
unhealthy fear and rage that people
Yeah.
don't know what to do with, right? They're terrified, and so in that through that terror, they have to find some sort of enemy to attack,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
as opposed to learning, I'm terrified,
Yeah.
and I'm going to let myself feel this wild force of terror
Yeah.
move through me and guide me in the way that the body as an animal body knows how to choose and stay safe and make the right take the right direction. But instead we want solutions from the mind.
Yeah, and it definitely seems like there's a lot of sort of inappropriate rage from different directions. I see that across the board politically. And what would you love everyone knew how to do? That if you could just wave the magic wand and give America a trauma tool, what would it be? Let's say the world, not just America. A lot of what we're talking about is global.
Sure. Look, I want people to trust themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's my one of my deepest intentions whenever I teach and work is that I want people to trust themselves. And in order to trust yourself, you have to get back to your body. You have to. That's where your resources are.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't have a magic wand. I know that one of the things is like to just stop. Feel your body right now. Just feel it. And let's imagine that there's nothing wrong. right? That you just are where you are with the tensions that you have, with the energies that might be stirring up inside of you. And then that's the starting point. And then at that starting point, can you soften one area of your body and take a breath?
Mm-hmm.
And in softening one area of your body, that energy will start to spread. And then, and this is something that perhaps I need to learn more about, not even perhaps, I do need to learn more about, because I know there's all this, like, nervous system is kind of one of the new buzzwords, like working with the polyvagal nerve and like,
Popular in trauma therapy, isn't it, to talk about the
yeah,
nervous system there?
yeah. But one of the trends that I see that I don't agree with, it makes me
Mhm.
uncomfortable, is that everybody's trying to calm each other down,
Right. Okay.
right? And I feel like, look, fear,
Yeah.
terror, rage, like those are potent forces in our body. They are there for a reason.
Yeah.
And so so learning to allow them to have more space and to enhance the container of your body ultimately reminds you that you are a resourceful animal that knows how to evolve and survive.
Right. By mastering those emotions, or by expressing them. I mean, I never. I guess I'm with you on the fact that I think constantly trying to calm people could actually be a kind of oppression in a way. Could be a kind of dissociation in another way, especially when people are angry for a reason.
Yeah.
Um, and I very rarely ever said to myself, you know what? I wish I was more full of rage and terror in that conversation with my wife last night. Right.
Right.
I very rarely look back and think, oh, I calmed myself down. That really didn't help. Normally, I go, I'm so glad that I, calmed myself down and didn't say that stupid ass thing, or
Yeah.
did say the thing that I was scared to say, or,
Yeah.
whatever it is.
Yeah. Look, I just finished teaching a workshop called
Yeah.
Embodying Emotional Power.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a big subject, right? And teaching it online in a 3.5, 4 hour scenario is really just the tip of the iceberg. But let's first shift this idea of good and bad emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Let's first just say they are energy in the body. All right. Now, your mind tells a story of what that's going to look like if you
Mm-hmm.
express the rage, if your mind tells a story if you're going to allow the terror, but that story's from your past.
Mm-hmm.
Now, healthy rage can be wild reverberation of energy and heat in your body. And if you have the capacity to let that rush through you, it doesn't come out twisted and attacking and um, saying mean things. It might actually like create space around you and allow for a new idea to come to you. Look at rage in nature. Look at when the earth quakes, when a tsunami hits, it tears things down, it
Yeah.
opens up space. Yes, things have to die, right? I'm
But
not
that's
gonna.
what rage is. And I mean, maybe we have different definitions here, right? But rage is a predisposition to destroy. It's not just an enemy. It has an external orientation. And I personally don't think of nature as being something that has a rage, because I don't think it has that emotional, vindictive kind of quality. A volcano isn't trying to hurt anyone. It just is. It's a volcano. Whereas someone in a rage is trying to hurt people.
In the toxic version, yeah.
Okay, so maybe we have different definitions here, and your website is called fierce embodiment, right? You've used this word fierce, which that makes a lot of sense to me as a word that could potentially not be about destroying or killing.
No, it's not about destroying or killing at all. It's about actually taking the power of these energies and embodying them, like being very fierce about embodying them, not calming them down. But that means I have to shift the story that I hold about them. And the only way I know how to do that is first to just allow the possibility that maybe there's a different way for this energy to run through my body. And then the second way is looking at, where do I stop it?
Mm-hmm.
Like when you get enraged, where do you stop it in your body? Do you grip your chest? Do you stiffen your neck? And then there's spinning need to survive in your head, however that is. That's not healthy rage. That's contracted rage.
Okay, healthy rage. All right. I mean, part of this is about terms and definitions a lot, right? Like what you call rage, I might call something else. So that's just one thing.
Maybe, Mark, but hold up on that because that you were calling it, I forget what you said, but like it's clear that you have a really specific view of how rage is and how shame is. And that's actually what I'm suggesting, that in the body, what if like it's just an energy that we've put a name on and we've then decided this is bad, this is good, because it wasn't allowed.
No. I don't see rage as bad because of how it feels. I can understand the perspective. It's something, there's something, a flow in the body, an energy in the body, if you will. I see it as undesirable because it leads to violence.
It can, but it doesn't have to.
And I'm not sure I want to practice that.
When I've had really healthy rage flow through my body in a bodywork session or in my own practice, right? I don't have any need to attack anybody. I feel immense clarity. My muscles get really strong. There's a really dropped in presence. And then I discover options of what I want to change and what I need to be different, because that's often what rage gets triggered. There's something that you don't want anymore.
Yeah. So you're seeing it as just this internal urge to destroy something which you don't want, and that might be a positive thing to do.
But I don't look at the word destroy. Like, it doesn't feel destructive to me in that way. When I held rage back, my story in my mind said, I'm going to destroy everything in my path if I let this flow, because that's how potent it was, because I'd been holding it down, holding it down, holding it down. When I finally, in a very safe scenario, learned, whoa, okay, that's like a massive tingling and heat down to my neck, right? Like the whole embodied experience. First of all, whatever I was fighting against lost its power. I became much more, let's say, self-contained and aware of what I wanted. And then I can direct that energy towards, how do I carry that out?
Mm-hmm. And we're also operating from fundamentally different models of emotion here, and the common model, which I think you're operating from mostly, as I hear it, is that emotion is something that moves through you as you call it, an energy.
Mm-hmm.
And my view of emotions is much more, it's something we do in the body that creates behaviors. And that's a different view of what emotion is.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. I something gets triggered, right? So like what you're talking about when you went to Germany and whatever got triggered in your body and you feel this discomfort. In order to stay there, you were doing something to try to mitigate it, right? Maybe not strongly, but something to try to mitigate it. Let's just say, like, to tone it down a little bit.
Because I what I was feeling and doing in my body was something which would have led to inappropriately unkind behaviors to the people I was with, and that didn't feel okay.
Of course it doesn't feel okay. So in a practice, I would take that scenario if it gets triggered a lot, and I would see, well, what is that? How do I get to that point in my body of wanting to be unkind? Right? Because that's the way you are wrapping yourself around that energy.
Okay, I feel like we're a bit of a loggerheads with this. I'm kind of bored of it, if I'm honest. Can I? There's a question here that I'm not bored of, though, which was jumping out at me that you sent me ahead of time. You talk about red flags in the embodiment world. So calming, overemphasis on calming. And I am actually with you on this one. I do see that as a red flag. Is there any others that you were thinking of when you wrote me that? Because I thought it was like, oh, that's interesting.
Well, look, I think that there's a lot of terms that people throw out right away instead of learning. They can't stand that, like everything's embodiment. It's the kind of thing of that there's a good embodiment and there's a bad embodiment, kind of like how yogis do that. I'm a good yogi, I'm a bad yogi.
I'm being really yogic right now. I'm being really embodied right now. This is my embodiment voice, my yoga voice, that kind of thing. Is that what you mean, Marcela?
I don't know. It turns into like a list of things that you've done. Have you meditated? Have you this? Have you that? Like I'm like good or bad. There's always this measurement of
CV.
And I just look at, like, we embody all the time. We embody all the time.
Consciously or unconsciously, though, right?
Yeah. There's awareness or there's a lack of awareness. There's movement or there's a lack of movement. There's stuckness or there's flow. Right? Sure. So that concerns me when people are all of a sudden starting to strive to be good embodiers, you know?
Like I'm not a good embodiment person if I'm not aware my whole time, or I'm holding my breath at all, or anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so that trend, I think, limits our curiosity.
Okay, nice. Any other red flags out there?
Well, kind of what, the subject you're bored of, really. Like this good emotion, bad emotion thing is something that I think is limiting our learning.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Okay. Yeah, yeah. The calming one, I do see as potentially a problem if it becomes the good is calm, and any other kind of strong emotional. I've had this with yoga from Buddhist friends, particularly. Any kind of
Yeah.
strong emotional expression is somehow worse than being, a kind of fucking Dharma robot. So this is one I can relate to.
Yeah, the calming down is it's basically saying like I don't think that you're capable of handling the power that you're holding inside of you.
Hmm.
And I don't agree with that. I think that if it's inside of us, we can hold it because we're already holding it,
Yeah,
right?
and again, I would say this is the difference, if you're willing to go there, between my model and yours, is that I don't think, I'm not saying one is right, is that you're talking about holding something like an energy within the body, and I'm saying the body is itself creating that thing. So it's not so much that it's like a thing flowing through us that we have to then, whatever. It's a different view of what emotion is. uh, yeah.
Potentially. I don't think so, but you're bored with the subject, so we can move on.
Fair enough. What does the future hold for you? Where are you going with all this? Like, do you have a vision for, like, not talking about red flags now, but the opposite? Like, is there a vision for how you'd love to see the embodiment world to be, or like what you'd like to bring to that?
Look, I'm super thrilled that more and more people are realizing that the body is a way towards transformation. Like that is wonderful for me, right? So great, like come on board. However, in
Yeah.
whatever form you long to become more yourself, right? So I think I'm still evolving this whole subject of shame.
Uh,
To me, Mark, and you will disagree because I think we had this in the first conversation that you're like, I don't feel shame. But I think it is one of the deeper wounds of our bodies.
uh-huh.
This wound of not enoughness that
Uh,
comes from some deep, deep disconnect, And I'm constantly holding this question of where does this appear? And can we begin to heal it so people trust themselves more and so people realize their unique qualities and how they're supposed to move and take shape in the world instead of this comparison and judgment and narrowness of options. So that is a subject that kind of never ceases to fascinate me of how can people move through the shame, trust themselves and become more human.
yeah, and it has opened as an area of interest to me since last time we spoke. Actually, it was a little while back, and I've become more aware in myself and others how it can be like subtly driving the show. Like, and this can be this visible shame, right? Like, oh my god, everyone saw me drunk last night. But then there's also and just there's also the way in which it can be invisibly nudging us in different directions behaviorally. And I have become
Absolutely.
interested in that since last time we talked.
Absolutely. And it harms your dreams, like because if it nudges you to not do something, to hold back, to stay quiet in seemingly benign situations, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So like imagine if you recognized it, if you stopped believing the old story of your not enoughness, whatever shape that takes, because that can also take too muchness. There's a lot of women who feel like they're too much in addition to not feeling enough. Now I said women because that is the area that I
It does
predominantly.
seem quite gendered. I hear way more often in my female students those two issues that you just said. Do you think
Yeah,
men don't talk about it, or we don't admit
yeah.
it, or do you think it's just less there? Are we less conditioned by society? Like, like, uh, like not feeling enough. I find it hard to relate to sometimes, if I'm honest.
I would say that it's almost all of the above of what you said,
Mm.
minus that it's not there. You know,
Hmm.
I think that a lot of the competitive drive that men have can be
An
the
overcompensation for
yeah,
not feeling enough underneath
the
it.
source of that can very much be some sort of, let's call it, like, you may not relate to it as not enoughness, but there's a feeling of like of a space or a hunger that can't be filled.
Yeah, men are ambitious in that way, right? Like in terms of like, we build crazy things like the Embodiment conference, right? Like big, crazy ass things. And it's like, I wonder how much that in myself and others I meet is just like a healthy desire to contribute, and how much is driven by some, almost everyone I know who's been famous, for example. I've met quite a few famous people now. And most people in the embodiment world are sort of micro fame, the kind of big wig trauma teachers and what have you. I wonder how many of us, and I say us because I'm in this industry, are driven by some sense of sort of compensation or not enoughness. It's a kind of an uncomfortable conversation, but I wonder how many people who have achieved great things didn't have a piece of that.
Hmm. I think that culturally, because it's out there and it's visible and people know about it, social media and this and that, it takes on a different life than if all of that weren't there and you were just staying true to yourself and building what you desire to build, creating what you desire to create, like a wild forest or a garden or something, something that starts from a seed, begins to grow, but there's no over efforting to make it famous and big and seen, and know that you stay really true to your core values and how those guide you.
It's just,
So,
certainly you're less pushed around by the winds of validation. I really feel sorry for people that are growing up as teachers with this, the constant validation from little likes and little clicks. And, I noticed in myself the feeling of enough, like it was like the conference got to a size the other day where I just went, you know what, that actually feels like enough. And it's almost like that's a lost feeling. And if it gets bigger, fine, it grows organically, fine. But it was just like, that'll do. Rather than there's always more people that could look at your YouTube channel or like your Instagram. There's always more, right? And I feel like this is kind of a risk in the modern world of what is enough.
look, I've taught workshops that have been full, and I've taught workshops that have had, 4 or 5 people, right? And that fear of doing something wrong and not making it happen, or and that shame that it's not happening and that people don't want me, absolutely comes into play, and I work my way through it. And in the end, that time that lasts is much, much less because I catch it at a very early
Mhm.
stage. And
Mhm.
I'm determined to actually really truly heal that so that I don't invest any energy on worrying about that. Because in the end, when I get on in a course or a class or a workshop, when I'm teaching what I'm teaching, which I am absolutely passionate about, I could care if it's one person or 20, and that's my max. Like, I don't, expand it beyond that. It doesn't matter because I'm in my groove, staying true to what I want to teach, and I'm teaching
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah. As you say, it's sometimes for me that's a tuning in of reconnecting to my own values, because I find there is a continuous process where I get pushed and pulled by, you know, hate mail, criticism, and then money, and then adoration, And I
Mm,
think anyone who isn't enlightened is always going to get a little bit pushed and pulled by that. And then for me, this is process of, I did this with Daniela and Banal earlier. We're the kind of leadership committee of the conference. We have a weekly meeting where we vote on stuff. And we would just like spend a few minutes like reconnecting to our motivation for doing it.
yeah,
So as not to be pushed and pulled by those factors.
yeah, yeah. It's important. It's important to do that as a practice because it's really easy to get pulled away from it.
What's the opposite of shame?
What do you mean by that?
Just an opening for a question. Like if shame exists, is there an opposite?
I don't know. Is there an opposite for anger? Is there?
I could give a version of opposites to some emotions for sure. If tenderness, for example, if something is an urge to destroy and tenderness is an urge to tend, one could go with that. It's just an
Yeah.
opening. Don't feel the free to decline the question.
No, it gets back to the way to the place where you and I disagree, because that makes it very binary, right? I can tell you that I can tell you toxic shame for me, for my body, makes me self-critical, critical of others, and unhappy. Let's just put it like in a very
Uh-huh.
simple terms, right?
Uh-huh.
When I go into the shame and I feel the pain that comes with it as well, right? Because there's a pain that comes with not enoughness, and I just like settle into my body and I let it run its course, and it is not always comfortable. There's a softening, there's an acceptance, there's a connection. So maybe that's part of it. Like I feel very connected to life when it's just, when I am not messing with it, when I'm not going into my habitual old way, when it gets stirred up in my body. So
Okay, I'll follow with it. Just another way to explore here, and I just see the time. We need to move towards wrap up relatively soon. Anything sort of you're putting out there at the moment you want to let people know about? I mean, I mentioned your sign, fierceembodiment.com, but is there any sort of particular offers or things that are?
yeah, I mean, since this whole COVID thing started, it kind of rushed me onto the shore of offering online, opportunities. So I'm doing movement classes every week, which have been phenomenal, really fun, gathering, you know, people from just like spanning the globe on different time zones. So I've got different classes that work with different time zones. And then I've been teaching these monthly workshops and about different subjects. So I worked on, one was boundaries, the last one was emotional power. The next one I'm pretty sure is going to be rejection, but I don't know when this is going to
Great
be.
topic. Great. I love working with that. I love working
Yeah.
with that. Some fun
Yeah.
games around that.
It's such a good subject and it's so insidious. My God. So that's coming up. And then in the background, I'm working on some bigger, projects. I really have wanted for a long time to do the shifting shame work that I do online, make an online course, because it will give me the chance to take more time with topics than in a weekend workshop. But it's still a little ways out, not super far out, but that's being handled. And then I am being strongly encouraged, and I know that this is just a fear spot for me, to create a teacher training. So that is, I'll put that out verbally into the world and see how that
Nice.
push
It's
pulls me forward.
Yeah, it's funny. Teacher training does bring things to a different level. I thought I knew my work, and I started doing teacher training. All of a sudden, I had to know it in a different way. I find it very interesting to make that shift. Actually, it forced me into more clarity around certain things.
Yeah.
Questions
Yeah.
other people asked that I didn't ask myself. So it was.
Absolutely. And I've been mentoring a couple people who want to learn it. And I said, like, great, I don't have a program right now, but I'll mentor you and let's see where it goes. It's
Mhm.
really fascinating.
Okay. Anything else to finish here, Marcel? Anything you want to say? Message about the body? Message about shame, rage? Anything at all?
Hmm. I just keep going back to trust. Like whatever you feel is not wrong. It just means that something has to work its way through your body. So be curious. If you don't have curiosity with this approach to life, you're just going to be hammering you're going to be flagellating yourself that you're doing something wrong. So I think that curiosity is a massive ingredient in evolving as a human.
Marcella, thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for the chance.